Is it true that wheat is bad for you? Is gluten getting the population fatter and making people sick? Dr. William Davis is a cardiologist who has prescribed a diet without wheat to more than 2,000 of his patients at risk, and according to what he says in the book, Wheat Belly, he has observed extraordinary results, reaching the conclusion that it is neither fat, nor sugar, nor sedentary life that is causing the obesity epidemic in modern societies. It is wheat. My name is Sei Charata from natugood.com, and this is a video that brings you a summary with the main ideas of the book Wheat Belly after our vignette. In this video, we will keep our focus on bringing you a summary only, and it is a compact summary. I will endeavor to share with you the main ideas of the book in a simplified language in case you want to review the material later or read it by yourself in more detail. So, by the way, for people who watch this video until the end, I have a very nice surprise. So check out here if this talk is interesting for you, and if you like the video, watch it until the end because there is some surprise for you right there. Introduction. Wheat Belly is a bestseller book that has shaken public opinion a lot, as well as the current fear that people have of gluten and foods prepared with wheat flour. In this video, we will keep our focus on bringing you a synthesis, a compact summary. We are going to use simplified language to share the main ideas of the book, and we hope that this brief compilation will encourage you to look for further information on the subject. So this is not a summary containing criticism of the book and does not represent an endorsement of the material either. We're just sharing our interpretation of the original work. William Davis defends the theory that the problem in our current diet is the modified wheat, which is being consumed in excess and contains a number of changes that affect good functioning of our body. 2 wholemeal bread slices have more power to raise the level of glucose in the blood than 2 tablespoons of sugar. And that's because wheat contains a special type of carbohydrate, amylopectin A. Its digestion is easy, turning into glucose and being absorbed quickly into the bloodstream. And because of that, wheat products increase blood glucose levels more than almost any other carbohydrate, from beans to candy bars. What is the problem with the increase of glucose? It is that an unwanted elevation of glucose triggers the action of insulin and causes accumulation of body fat, especially visceral fat. The consumption of wheat amylopectin A causes a peak of glucose and then a sharp drop. At first, we feel satisfied and soon after, hunger. And that's why the person who has a breakfast with bread and cereals will quickly become hungry, feel fatigued and cloud-minded again before lunchtime. The book's main attack is on the modified wheat, which is not the same cereal of 50 years ago that our ancestors would be grounding to make bread every day. Today's wheat is a laboratory product, the result of dangerous intersections to increase productivity. No test has been done on animals or humans to check the safety of these new lines created. And this new wheat turned out to be the main source of gluten and also contains some special properties that we're going to explain in this video. Other grains such as rye, barley, spelt, triticale, bulgur wheat and kamut, they are also gluten sources, and so when William Davis is speaking about wheat, he actually means all grains containing gluten. And what is gluten? Gluten is the general name given to a group of proteins found in grains. Gluten is what gives dough that elasticity that enables it to be opened with a roll, enables the pizzaiolo to turn it on his fingertips, and makes it rise and stretch. Whomever has tried to cook with gluten-free products knows how difficult it is because everything is too crumbly. In the last 50 years, hybridization, crossing, and genetic modification of wheat gave way to new proteins that didn't exist before. Perhaps you've heard the claim that only people diagnosed with celiac disease need to avoid gluten, but Dr. William Davis has a different opinion. He explains that gluten is not the only villain in wheat flour. What is the wheat belly that gives the name to the book? It is the visceral fat accumulation which happens through years of consumption of food that triggers insulin. Some people accumulate this fat on the thighs or on the buttocks, on the waistline, and there are also men who have breasts. And this problem is not merely aesthetic. The bigger the wheat belly, the greater the number of activated inflammatory responses, that is, we are more likely to develop heart disease and cancer. William Davis reports that when his patients remove from their diet all the products made with wheat flour, they experience a rapid and effortless weight loss. Also, they acquire several health advantages such as the reversal of diabetes and the disappearance of symptoms of reflux, cramps, and diarrhea. The book brings a list of wheat documented effects on humans: appetite stimulation, obesity, addiction caused by exorphins, exaggerated blood sugar peaks, glycation linked to disease and aging, inflammation, pH changes that cause damage to the bones, immune reactions, and many disturbances. And so far we had an overview of the main ideas of the book. Now we will go to the more specific part and we'll go into the details. So if you keep here with us, you will learn what the book says about the effect of wheat on our brain, and this has a lot to do with the book Brain by David Perlmutter. And we can also talk about obesity, celiac disease, diabetes, acidity, aging, heart risks, and acne. Are you ready? Okay. Addictive properties, the effects of wheat in our mind. Wheat has some of the effects of the opiate drugs. That's why people face great difficulty when trying to eliminate it from their diet. And that is, wheat causes addiction on some people. Dr. Davis says once inside the brain, polypeptides from wheat bind to the morphine receptors exactly the way opiate drugs bind. And that is very powerful. Wheat is one of the few foods that can change behavior, induce pleasure, and generate withdrawal syndrome when being eliminated from the diet. That happens because in the wheat digestion there is the release of morphine-like compounds that bind to the opiate receptors in the brain. That induces a kind of a reward, a slight euphoria. In other words, it is a delight. It is delicious. And because of that, there is an incentive for repetitive use. And take note, wheat is an appetite stimulant. It makes you want more and more. However, those who can remove wheat from their diet will notice hunger and compulsion decreasing, calorie intake also decreasing, mood and self-being will improve, excess weight will go away, and the wheat belly will also shrink. Wheat and obesity. Imagine losing almost 1 pound a day just by removing wheat from your diet. That's what the book tells us. Eliminate wheat and your weight will drop quickly, effortlessly, often reaching 40, 60, 90 pounds lost or more over a year, depending on your weight at the beginning of the process. Wow! Wheat is presented as the leading cause of obesity and diabetes. However, the general public opinion is that whole grains are healthy, isn't it? The book says that according to dietary criteria generally accepted, if any harmful thing is replaced by some less harmful thing, in the case of white flour being harmful and whole wheat flour being less harmful, it appears that a lot of that less harmful thing should do well to those who consume it. And according to this reasoning, if cigarettes with high tar amounts are harmful and cigarettes with low tar amounts are less harmful, well, then lots of cigarettes with low tar amounts should be great for the smoker. That's an imperfect analogy perhaps, but it shows that faulty reasoning can be used to justify the proliferation of grains in our diet. And indeed, in recent decades, that has been the policy of various organs such as the United States Department of Agriculture, the American Heart Association, the American Diabetic Association, and the American Diabetes Association. Eat more whole grains. That's what they say, right? Moreover, that type of recommendation is usually followed by advices such as cut down fat. William Davis criticizes the policy of whole grains increase, that is, carbohydrate increase and fat reduction. That, according to him, has brought problems. Visceral abdominal fat is not an aesthetic problem, it is a source of inflammations. Visceral fat is a metabolic factory that produces inflammatory signs and abnormal cytokines such as leptin, resistin, and tumor necrosis factor. All these together will cause diabetes, hypertension, and heart disease, and abnormal insulin responses. Why are we talking so much about insulin? Because when we eat foods with wheat, we have an increase in glucose levels in the blood, and that causes an elevation to the levels of insulin, which is released by the pancreas in response to the presence of glucose in the blood. The more glucose, the higher the amount of insulin that has to be released to move glucose within the cells. And diabetes develops when the capacity of the pancreas to produce insulin in response to increased amounts of glucose in the blood is exceeded. However, even those who haven't had a diabetes diagnosis can be suffering from high levels of glucose and insulin, which result in accumulation of visceral fat and therefore suffering from inflammation issues. Liver and muscle tissues start to react less to insulin, and that is called insulin resistance. In that situation, the pancreas has to produce increasing amounts of insulin, and that becomes a vicious cycle of more insulin resistance and more visceral fat deposited. Also, in the process, there is a glucose drop in the blood as a result of high insulin levels. That causes hypoglycemia and is followed by an uncontrollable hunger. The person in this state is dying to eat something urgently to make the glucose levels rise again. And combined with the addictive effects, this makes the situation even more likely to lead to obesity. Another problem: visceral fat produces estrogen in both genders, and that is not good for anybody. Estrogen in excess increases the risk of breast cancer in women and makes men develop breasts, the male breasts, and that's a hormonal mess. Of course, some people can say that story of removing wheat from your diet, that's baloney if the person keeps eating bad stuff like sweets, drinking fizzy drinks, and eating corn snacks. What happens? Well, the answer that the book gives us is that most adults already know that they have to avoid huge amounts of fizzy drinks, ice cream, and sweets. That is a necessary part of the effort to lose weight. But avoiding wheat is what seems to be unnatural. Still on obesity, there is an interesting tip. Live without gluten, but don't eat those foods labeled gluten-free. And that deserves an explanation. Gluten is a wheat protein responsible for some problems, but not all problems. Remember when we spoke of amylopectin A that releases glucose in our bloodstream very fast? The warning is that an entire industry is emerging and offering people the same breads, cakes, desserts in general that are gluten-free because they are made with glutinous rice flour, cornstarch, potato starch, tapioca, and other things. All of this is dangerous for those who want to lose weight because despite not having gluten, they are still carbohydrates that will elevate glucose and therefore increase insulin in the blood, including gaining weight. By the way, William Davis actually complements by saying that food prepared with cornstarch, rice starch, potato starch, tapioca starch, they are amongst the few that can increase glucose level in the blood even more than wheat products. In other words, gluten-free foods are not problems-free foods. In fact, they are listed in the book as the likely reason for those who have eliminated wheat from their diet but still failed to lose weight. Eliminating wheat doesn't mean eliminating gluten only. It also means eliminating amylopectin A, which is this form of complex carbohydrate that raises glucose levels in the blood even more than regular sugar. It makes no sense to replace amylopectin A from wheat by gluten-free items such as biscuits and pasta that are filled with starch, rice starch, corn starch, potato starch, tapioca starch, and they are readily absorbed. Therefore, in addition to not eat wheat, we also have to stay away from gluten-free cakes, biscuits, pasta, and bread. Gluten and celiac disease. Around 1% of the population is unable to tolerate gluten even in tiny quantities. They are the people who suffer from celiac disease, and if they eat anything containing gluten, they can have diarrhea, cramping, and yellow stools that will float, which is an indicator that fats have not been properly digested, and that can lead to malnutrition, which is a dangerous condition. However, even if you don't suffer from celiac disease, it is worth to be watchful because celiac disease is the typical example of wheat intolerance that's a standard to compare to all types of wheat intolerance. What is that we're trying to say by that is that Dr. William Davis says that celiac disease can manifest in many ways. While, according to him, 50% of the people affected have cramps, diarrhea, and nutrition problems, the other half will have anemia, migraine, arthritis, neurological symptoms, infertility, short stature in children, depression, fatigue, and many other symptoms. The doctor suspects that there has been a fundamental change in the disease, perhaps linked to the change in the wheat itself. When he shows numbers that prove that the incidence of the disease has increased, one could say, well, that's because we have more diagnostics. But he makes it very clear, the incidence of the disease is increasing, and there is a parallel with the increase of causes of type 1 diabetes, autoimmune diseases, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, and allergies. The wheat gluten gliadin releases a bowel protein called zonulin, which regulates intestinal permeability. And what is the problem with zonulin? Zonulin loosens intercellular junctions, that is, it increases the permeability of the intestine. Then, the wheat gliadins and other proteins enter the bloodstream, and in the blood, they are treated as invasive, and lymphocyte immune responses start an inflammatory process, and that's what is behind the celiac disease, thyroid disease, joint disease, and asthma. Wheat and diabetes. On diabetes, we have already showed here the essence of the book's theory. Wheat consumption increases the amount of glucose in the blood, and wheat exocrines make our appetite increase and make us eat more. That all increases the amount of insulin, which over time can overload the pancreas and also leads to accumulation of body fat produced by an excess of glucose. In addition to the overload for having to produce more insulin, the pancreas also suffers damage by inflammations, oxidative damage, leptin, various interleukins, tumor necrosis factor, all coming from inflammation triggered by visceral fat. And what can we do about it? Just eliminate wheat from our diet to reverse a constellation of phenomena that would result in diabetes. However, it is precisely the opposite that has historically happened. From the 1980s, the inappropriate theory that we should cut fat from our food started to emerge. That has caused people to eat more whole grain foods. Hence, the wheat consumption increased even further, leading to the increase of weight, obesity, visceral fat, and diabetes like never before. Wheat and acidity. Another point is that wheat and cereals tend to change pH when it comes to acidity, so that our diet is no longer alkaline and becomes acidic. That causes osteoarthritis to appear with joint pain as a symptom. Inflammation is also associated with destructive effects on the joints, together with the glycation phenomenon, which is a modification of the proteins in the bloodstream and body tissues, causing joints of knees, hips, and hands to be more inflamed with pain and arthritis. Wheat and aging. Here we need to understand a concept called AGE, the Advanced Glycation End Product, and that is what hardens the arteries, causing atherosclerosis, that makes the eyes with those cataract clouds and confuses the synapses, causing dementia. Although some AGEs enter the body through our food, several of them are formed within the body because of the high levels of glucose in the blood. And I think you already realized a common pattern here. High glucose levels in the blood cause a number of problems, and it is the wheat we are consuming that is increasing that glucose. Glucose molecule reacts with proteins, generating AGE in an irreversible process. The more sugar or wheat, the more AGE. And why that? We have to remember that wheat is the complex carbohydrate, which is amylopectin A, which is broken and becomes too much glucose and is quickly absorbed in the blood. If AGE is causing accelerated aging, the primary source of glucose is wheat. Wheat and cardiac disease. This one is a topic on which I think it could be better if we would make several other segmented videos. So if you have registered your email on natugood.com, I can send you more details later. But basically, what we need to understand is that the book says that wheat increases the amount of glucose in the blood because of amylopectin A, that you already know, and that glucose will be processed into triglycerides. And that is, wheat carbohydrate ends up turning into fat in our bloodstream and then in our wheat belly. and that is lipogenesis. Again, it's a process in which our body converts sugars into triglycerides in the liver because of the high insulin levels in the bloodstream. In the configuration of the majority of people's meals, the fats represent a very small contribution to the cardiac risk when compared to the great impact that is caused by carbohydrates, because in general people are eating an exaggerated amount of products made with flour. Wheat and acne. Another problem associated with the consumption of wheat is acne. People who don't consume wheat don't seem to be suffering from acne. William Davis even gives a special message for cocoa lovers. Chocolate with 85% of cocoa doesn't cause acne. What seems to be causing the spots is insulin, which is stimulating the release of the hormone for growth factor IGF-1. And furthermore, daily products also influence the ability of insulin to cause acne. The problem is not in the fat of the dairy products, but in the protein that is present in bovine products. What the author recommends is to keep an eye on foods that increase glucose and insulin in the blood to fight acne. Of course, wheat is on that list. What to do? Well, I promised if you would stay until the end of the video, I would bring you some very good news. So here you go. I know that we have used here several technical terms. We talked about amylopectin A, IGF-1, AG, zonulin. Anyway, I tried to simplify the content of the book at the most, but to keep faithful to the content, I couldn't leave those terms out. So in order for you to always have a reference of what we have said here, you can go to our website, natugood.com/wheatbelly. And once you're there, you will find a downloadable file, an ebook that we prepared for you with all the details from this video in writing for your reference. And what's more, beyond what we talked here in this video, there is another part which is with practical tips for implementing the ideas of the book. That extra part is also in the ebook we created. You can go to natugood.com/wheatbelly. My name is Sei Charata from natugood.com. I hope you have enjoyed this video about the book Wheat Belly by Dr. William Davis. And detailed videos like this one give us a lot of work to put together. So if you liked it, we appreciate if you give us your like. If you didn't like, you can also feel free to provide us with your feedback, because this is our project and this feedback is very important for us to continue improving video after video. If you want to help us make our project grow, you can share this video on your favorite social networks, and don't forget that you can go to natugood.com/wheatbelly to download the file with everything we said and also some extra practical tips. All the best for you.